Please have your seat. Bajit, tell them to everybody, please sit here. Please sit inside. Close the door, please close the door, and also close the door. এই তোমরা পিছনে এই দরজাটা বন্ধ করে দাও, আওয়াজ আসে, এই আওয়াজগুলো বন্ধ করার জন্য। আর আরেকটা জিনিস, একটু ওই যখন আলোচনা চলতে থাকে তোমরা একটু কথা বলো না প্লিজ, একটু শোনার চেষ্টা করো কি বলে, একটু। আর দু একটা প্রশ্ন আমি এক্সপেক্ট করি জেন্ডার স্টাডিজ ডিপার্টমেন্টের স্টুডেন্টদের মধ্যে থেকে অন্ততপক্ষে একজন বা দুজন হলেও একটা দুটো প্রশ্ন করাটা ভালো। আমার ধারণা যে এটা একটা উচিত, মানে প্লিজ, হ্যাঁ, তোমরা চেষ্টা করো একটা প্রশ্ন করতে অন্ততপক্ষে, ঠিক আছে? আর ফিল্ম স্টুডেন্ট যারা আছে তাদের তো মিনিমাম 10টা প্রশ্ন করা উচিত। ঠিক আছে, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। আমরা এখন শুরু করতে যাচ্ছি, হ্যাঁ, প্লিজ অ্যাটেনশন প্লিজ, থ্যাংক ইউ।
Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. Today is day 2nd, 17th January. Our second session is going to be start. This session is presided by Syed Salahuddin Jaki. He's a Bangladeshi film director, producer, and film writer. We have two discussion in this session. But the keynote paper is going to be presented by Yana Lakshara, Bulgarian filmmaker. She has graduated with an MFA in film directing from Chongwon University, Seoul, with the award-winning short film The Bridge. The Bridge we have already screened in the Dhaka Film Festival, right? Bridge? We screened another one, second one, okay. We have two discussion. Dr. Ipsita Barad, Head of Mass Communication and Videography Department, St. Xavier College, Kolkata, India. And also via online, we are getting Shreyashi Sengupta, producer, film distribution specialist, managing director, Darpan Global, and CEO, Continental Entertainment, Singapore. So I'm going to hand over this microphone to Syed Salahuddin Jaki to continue this session. আমাদের এই কই ভলান্টিয়ার কই, এটা কে রাখে? তুমি রাখো।
কই দিবে এটাকে একটু এক্সপ্লেইন দিবা রাখা কোশা করে কাটবা কাল দিবেন বা ধরে যখন তখন একদম ধরে আমরা ডিজিটাল যুগের নাম ব্যাটারি ব্যাটারি বলতে হ্যালো Thank you. It's really a great occasion because the subject is a very valid one. So we have today with us Yana. She's from Bulgaria. We had really good relation with Bulgarian embassy in Dhaka just after independence. I remember the name of the ambassador at that time, Mr. Satirava, if I pronounced it correctly, and Mrs. Satirava, beautiful lady, no doubt, like you. And my special paper in Pune Film Institute was on a Polish film. Polanski was my subject, and I could interview Polanski in Dhaka when he came to Dhaka. Wonderful person, very whimsical, but a great person. And we have Ipshita আমাদের মাটির মানুষ, She's basically a teacher. I really feel proud and fortunate to be with Ipshita. She has dedicated her life. Barat has different meanings. In Bengali, Barat has a different connotation, different meaning. But anyway, I'll call her Ipshita. That's more intimate name, Ipshita. The first I would request. Oh yes, online. Sreya is there. She's in Singapore. She's in India now. Okay, you could just fly. Take just half an hour. Which part of India you are in? Kolkata. Okay.
I'm in Kolkata, but I'm down with COVID. So,
ঠিক আছে, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই।
আমিও মাটির মানুষ।
Now, yes, welcome মাটির মানুষ। আমরা সবাই মাটি থেকে, we all are from this house.
আমার আদি বাড়ি ঢাকা।
Oh, that's great. ঠিক আছে, আপনার সঙ্গে আমি ঢাকায় ভাষায় কথা বলবো।
নিশ্চয়ই।
I'll now request Yana. Wonderful keynote paper. I read it, and she has really some good observation and at the same time good reflections and some questions she has raised. Those are the vital questions addressed to you all here, and that's very important. Yana, would you please take the floor? Oh, sure.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Yana. I'm from Bulgaria, but I'm going to talk to you about Korean directors. The reason why I'm going to talk about Korean directors is because I managed to do an MFA in film directing in Seoul, in the capital of South Korea. And I was really interested in the development of Korean cinema. I guess many of you have heard about Parasite and Squid Game, right? But I'm going to take you back a little bit in the past. The movies that I'm going to talk about, especially the older ones, are actually available on YouTube. There is a special channel by the Korean Film Council, and they have all of their classical films. So you can search them afterwards. The newer ones, if you get interested in them, I'm sure that you are going to find a way to search them somewhere. I know that the names that I'm going to pronounce are going to be a little bit difficult. I have to say that although I speak to a certain extent Korean, I still have a problem with Korean names. So in the booklets for today's conference, you can find my paper and check those strange names. But anyways, I'm going to read my paper. I'm going to try and be as clear as possible, and I really hope that you're going to be interested in the topic. The topic that I'm going to talk about is the characters that are depicted by female directors, whether it is a matter of choice or responsibility for us. Today we are in the year 2022, and we should be talking about space travel and the global warming or virtual reality or time traveling. But instead, we are talking about gender equality. We are asking ourselves whether a certain individual should be limited or guided in their artistic expression by their sex by birth. The share of female directors in Hollywood for the year 2019 was 5 times bigger from the number 5 years earlier. So when I read this, I was like, wow, 5 times bigger. This means like, I don't know, like 70, 80%. And then when I read the statistics, it turns out that 5 years earlier, the number was 1.9, like less than 2% of the directors in Hollywood were female, which means that 5 times by 2%, it's less than 10%. Women comprised 16% of directors working on the top 100 grossing films in 2020, which is up from only 12% in 2019 and 4% in 2018. So these are numbers that literally mean close to zero. That's still the reality despite the conscious efforts by especially film festivals to boost the number of female directors visible in the industry. And it's that reality that contributes to another reality. We, as filmmakers, but also as audience, we pay special attention to any film helmed by a woman, since it's a thing that happens more seldom than having a film directed by a man. And of course, by putting in the spotlight every film made by a female director, arises the question about the responsibility and the choices made by this respective female director when creating the film. Does a female director need to show in their work that it is a female on the director's chair? Do the characters represented on screen need to speak an ambassadors for female rights? Is the responsibility for the characters and stories portrayed bigger than just because the film is made by a female director? When exploring those questions, I'm about to use as examples movies from South Korea made within the span of more than 60 years, starting by the very first film made by a Korean female director back in 1955 and going all the way to the present. So let's go back in time, not with a time machine, unfortunately, we still don't have that. The very first Korean film directed by a woman is called The Widow. The director's name is Park Nam-ok. The film follows the story of a young widow subject to the prejudices against her position in society. Trying to provide for her daughter as well as find love, she becomes entangled in the lives of her late husband's friend, his wife, and her lover. When I watched The Widow, I was really stunned because the first thing that I actually found out about this film was that the director had given birth quite recently before starting to shoot the film. She actually had the baby on set. She was actually nursing the baby on set. But this is part of being a woman. And then the second thing that impressed me very much is that instead of a solemn, not expecting anything from the future passive widow, the one depicted in this 1955 film is somebody who not only enjoys life, takes advantage of men, but also is a mother who is willing to give away her child for the sake of her own well-being. It is a character that runs away from the stereotype of the devoted mother, a character that has actual human flaws. I thought that it is very courageous for this female director to go against the social convention, to show a woman that actually is close to the real-life woman with their passions and fears and struggles. I looked at the protagonist's character as an attempt to add to the palette of female characters presented on the big screen as a way to stand for the women that are different, that are unconventional. We were talking yesterday with Oya Dogan about the representation of women quite often as victims, as mothers, as daughters, in a very stereotypical way. This widow, trust me, if you have the chance to watch the movie, is nothing you have ever seen before. But then, after researching furthermore for this film, I found out that the script for the film was actually written by the husband of the director. And at first I thought, well, it shouldn't matter who wrote the script, whether it is a woman or a man, as long as the person knows the human nature well and describes it skillfully. But then I got really worried, because what if the male screenwriter was trying to put down women and show what a woman shouldn't be by pointing fingers at her? All of a sudden, the message of the film changed just because of the gender of the writer. And I wondered whether Park Nam-ok, the director of the film, was aware of that, whether she accepted directing the movie just because it was a chance for her to direct. This is something that I'm going to come back also later. Chronologically, in the history of Korean cinema, the next 3 films directed by women have a lead characters again women. This in itself is impressive, because we don't have that many female protagonists in general. But once taking a closer look at the characters themselves, to me they have a more or less wrong message to the female audience. This sustained the question I already have with Pak Namok's choice for a central female character. How careful a woman should be when she chooses the characters to put on the big screen as a director. The first film I'm talking about is called A Woman Judge. It's a movie from 1962. The director is called Hong Eun-won. Although shot in 1962, the movie is still painfully valid today. It is about a woman that successfully follows a professional career, and she has to face the family criticism for her achievements in the face of her husband suffering from inferiority complex. The reason why this particular film made me think of the responsibility of a woman director when showing such a character is the fact that the main character in A Woman Judge actually submits to the social pressure. When she goes home, she transforms into a housewife who gives her best to serve the perfect dinner because that's what a wife should do. When her husband cheats, she forgives him because the reason for him cheating is her absence. All those moments give a false message that complies with social norms which put a woman in a subordinate position towards men. And considering this message comes from a female director, one comes to think, is it more valid because a woman is behind this message? Or is the director trying to make us angry by portraying such a character? And is she trying to make us stand against those prejudices? In another movie from the 60s, the 1965 film The Girl Raised as a Future Daughter-in-Law, I know it's a very long and strange name, by director Treani, the main character is a young woman who is sent to the house to do the housework at a rich household and later become the wife of the family's only son. Depicted as a diligent and obedient, although joyful girl, the main character doesn't possess identity and her own will. She follows her mother's decision, her mother-in-law's decision. Again, this character's message complies with the society's image of a young girl that respects the elders and follows the rules of her time. But is it only of her time? It's quite interesting that the same director made a film later, which on the surface at least has a total opposite in terms of a lead female character. The name of the movie from 1967 is One-Sided Love of a Princess. It shows a proactive, bold and adventurous female character. To some extent, actually it reminded me of the main character in The Widow. It follows the story of a princess. One day she and her court lady escape from the palace to look around the city, where during an accident she is saved by a scholar. She falls in love with him and does everything in her power to win him for herself. It is a female character that follows her goals and is strong enough to face the social criticism in the name of what she wants. But the reason for the female lead's boldness is a man. She falls in love with a man and is ready to overcome any obstacle in order to find him and win his heart. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to fight love, on the contrary. But considering that this is only the fourth movie made by a female director in Korea, I cannot help myself but to ask, is that the thing that should motivate a young girl to be strong? Is it the longing for male attention and love the right driving force that should give a woman the strength to face the opposition coming from inside and outside her home? And trust me, in this movie, like, she faces real oppression and she's really fighting, like as if she's fighting for her life in order to get what she wants and be with this man. Additionally, the strength in her can be actually interpreted not as strength, but as lightheadedness and immaturity of a very young girl that doesn't know anything about real life and he's been spoiled ever since she was born. All that said, I guess we have to consider the time when the above-mentioned four movies were made. Considering them outside the context of the time won't give us the full picture. Considering the male-dominant and male-centered society in which those female directors used to live, one might think that the only way for them to be allowed to sit on the director's chair was by more or less complying with the social norms. Of course, it doesn't make it unnecessary or impossible to reflect on the impact of those films on the female audience. Has the director, probably the director has just directed the movies because they had a chance. After those classical works from the 50s and 60s with female protagonists, I would like to bring into the light a filmmaker that put on the table another aspect of the character's question. Since a movie is directed by a woman, does she have to concentrate or limit herself only to female-male characters? Considering the fact that male directors boldly depict women in their movies and their ability to do it is, in a truthful way is rarely questioned, then probably we should give the same right to female directors to show male characters with the claim of being genuine. Actually, just yesterday I was having a conversation with one of our colleagues here who has a project which has a woman as the main character. So I asked him, why did you choose to have a woman as a character? And it was very interesting that he said that this is because he was raised in a family with more women, so that's what he knows. The director I am going to talk about now is called Im Sun Lee, and she has mainly male characters in her movies, actually. The first film that I'm going to talk about is one of the few ones that she has females as protagonists. This movie is called Forever the Moment. It is based on the true story of the Korean national female handball team which competed in the 2004 Summer Olympics. Being a divorced woman, being a working mother, having to work despite your painful monthly period, there is hardly a topic close to a woman's heart that is not touched in the film about the road to the gold of the handball team. It is sincere and genuine portrayal of being a woman in the sports world. But apart from this film, which is really truthful to female nature, most of the other films with the same director have, as I said, male characters. After having watched another 4 of the other films of director Im Sun Lee, called Three Friends, Waikiki Brothers, Rolling Home with a Bull, and Southbound, all of them having an almost all-male cast, or at least the main character is definitely a man, I would say that all those movies speak not just for the male part of the world, but also for the female. They discuss topics that are familiar to anybody: trying to succeed in life, finding one's place in the world, trying to keep friendships, relationships. In those movies, I wouldn't picture relationships with parents, trying to break away from the past, facing a love from the past. So definitely those movies, I wouldn't picture the woman in the director's chair, but a genderless person. Im Sun Lee doesn't seem to stand behind the camera with the consciousness of being a woman who needs to stand ground for other women when it comes to choosing the characters and topics. She tells universal stories by ignoring her gender identity and even, I would say, assuming the personality of a traditionally male director, telling those universal stories to male characters. I cannot help myself but ask, would have she been able to tell those universal stories with powerful and meaningful messages if she would have chosen women as her protagonists? I have to admit that especially while watching Rolling Home with a Bull, I kept asking myself whether me as a female director, I will be as moved and absorbed in that really philosophical story if the main character was portrayed through a woman. Yes, I am also that influenced by the fact that we have so many stories like this portrayed by men that I'm so used to seeing men in those stories. The movie follows an unknown poet who, jaded by a series of failures in Seoul, returns to his hometown to help his elderly parents work their farm. a story that can be easily be told from a female perspective. So on one hand, here comes the social and industry pressure to tell stories through characters that will appeal to everybody, both women and men. And that, unfortunately, is much harder if the bearer of the message is female. And director Im Sun-le has more or less turned her back to her female identity by choosing to tell her stories in the socially acceptable way. On the other hand, we have to ask ourselves, is that a bad thing? Since still the universal message is brought on the big screen and it is strong enough to move the audience and make them think. And considering that probably if she would have chosen to have female protagonists, her films might have been much less successful in terms of audience reach and box office, which is also something we need to consider. So here we come to the dilemma. The first dilemma is, if a female director wants her message to reach a larger audience, both male and female, it looks like she has to concentrate on delivering universal messages rather than female-specific messages, and trying to find another supporting methods in order to succeed, like having males as protagonists. And the second dilemma, if a female director wants to tell a woman's story through a woman's perspective and not in a genre film, she has to be prepared to have a more limited audience that will resonate with her messages. And here comes another category of films made by female directors, pure genre films. We talked also about this yesterday, women and genre films. As an example, I will use another film from the really impressive filmography of director Im Sun-le. I must say I'm a huge fan of the director. She's really diverse, she's really amazing, and you can find everything in her filmography. From, as I said, universal messages, to the genre film, to the female-centric films, to our coming-of-age stories. I think it's a dream come true to have a filmography like hers. So the film I'm talking about in this case is a genre film called The Whistleblower. It was a big box office success in Korea. Again, it is based on a true story, and it explores the hidden face of Korea's science industry. A journalist named Min Chul gets information that the biggest sterility clinic in Korea buys eggs illegally. With the instant feeling of getting an exclusive, he launches the investigation helped by a male scientist who is the whistleblower. Both center characters in the film are men. The movie strives to make an entertaining cinema experience for the audience. An experience during which the question about the director's gender doesn't come to one's mind. It is just telling a compelling story in a cinematic way. And it actually deals with serious problems in Korean society about corruption, about the gameplay in the big industry and in the big money. By saying that, here comes the next question, whether such an approach towards filmmaking by a female director is good or bad. On one hand, we shouldn't forget that cinema is also, sometimes, entertainment. So as long as those works achieve the goal in terms of delivering a satisfying movie experience to the audience, we shouldn't judge those directors if not choosing a feminist point of view. But there are also genre films that manage to have female protagonists and touch on really specific female problems. The two movies I want to talk about are Missing and Princess Aurora. Director Ioni's Missing is a 2016 movie, which is a suspense thriller. It has two female characters in its center as protagonists. It deals with the painful subject of being a single mother that is treated also in written and directed by Park Jong-in's Princess Aurora. It's a 2005 film. In Princess Aurora, we have a grieving the death of her child mother, who goes on a murderous revenge spree. Both of those films try to criticize the absence or the abdication of the men from their role as fathers. They are also clearly showing the stigma that a woman carries with herself after getting a divorce in South Korea. Last but not least, we have the romance films helmed by female directors. The films that I would like to mention are Lee Jong-hyun's Art Museum by the Zoo and Eunice Ing and Love Exposure. I would dare to say that female directors have a special responsibility when it comes to depicting romance on screen, and that they still are in debt to their female audience in terms of truthfully depicting the reality in terms of romantic relationships. From the above-mentioned 3 movies, the first 2 play with the classical love story in which the guy wins the heart of the girl. They are much closer to our fantasies and stereotypes in terms of what the Prince Charming should be. They play with the notion that women need men as support. In the case of Art House by the Museum, the main character needs the help of the man in order to finish writing her script. And in the case of ING, in order to die peacefully. They assume that a woman's life is incomplete without the strong male presence next to her. Remember yesterday we were talking about the man who needs to fix our things, or like this being the only reason why we need a man. But it is a story that is dangerous. It assumes that if a woman in real life doesn't find her male, if a woman doesn't find her male half, she is something less. She lacks something. Maybe that's the reason why I prefer the other movie I mentioned. It's called Love Exposure. This movie tells the story of 2 female friends in their 30s. One of them is a free-spirited woman working as a photographer who is completely content with her intimate relationship with a married man. She has no intention of getting married herself. Meanwhile, her best friend is a fashionable and confident woman who married her husband because of his money. Yes, there are also women that marry men for money. She is shocked to find out that he's cheating on her. And now come the dilemmas of those women. Although, yes, Love Exposure has the romance part, it is much more of a road movie when it comes to what those 2 main characters want from life, not just from love. Was it worth it marrying a man for his money? Does she actually love him? Does she get to love him now that she knows that he's cheating on her? What about her friend who is having the affair with the married guy, who is actually at some point ready to get a divorce? Is that what she wants? And just as this movie, I keep asking myself, even after reviewing all those films and their directors, what characters a female director should choose? On one hand, a director, being an artist, a creative person, should be free to choose their own characters, topics, and messages, which means that a director should be able to describe their characters in the way they see them and want them to be. But on the other hand, according to me, every artist has a responsibility when it comes to their work. The way a character is shaped, the message that a character bears with themselves could have an influence on the people who get in touch with it. Art, media have a crucial role when it comes to shaping our society's stereotypes and opinions. A well-made piece of art, in our case a well-made movie, can be a trendsetter in terms of the way we see specific people. A movie can change the world, can change stereotypes. Yesterday we were talking about changing people's life during the discussion with our colleague Evdokia. This said, this responsibility is not dependent on a person's gender. Rather than looking at one's movie as a movie being made by a woman or a man, it has to be regarded as a movie made by a human being that as such has to be responsible for the messages and the characters in general. This means that also female directors, just as male directors, have to be able to take on the responsibility and stay behind what they are showing to their movies. But at the same time, unfortunately, still, being a female director is not the same as being a male director. As mentioned at the beginning of this study, the percentage of women sitting on the director's chair is so small that every time of having a female director, this is considered a phenomenon that should be mentioned. We say, wow, finally a woman got an Oscar for directing. Wow, finally a woman got an Oscar for screenwriting. Has she? Do we have actually a woman with an Oscar for screenwriting? No, right? So we're still waiting, and it's going to be like headlines, I'm sure of that. I still remember when we had Chloe Zhao and her Eternals, and everybody was discussing, can a woman direct such a blockbuster genre film? Or Wonder Woman. It wasn't considered as a genre movie, but a genre movie directed by a woman. Even The Matrix now, it's been also considered, like all the comments that I've been reading online, every time it is specified that it's been made by the director of her transitioning into a woman. And I would say that I really don't like this fact, but being a female director means one still should be more conscious about the characters we put on the big screen, about the story and the way we portray them. As a woman, we should be able to portray other women in a more accurate way, and we should be able to deliver those messages that are important to women. There are too many stereotypes of women imposed through female characters created by male directors. Of course, there are also many wonderful films made by men talking about women, don't get me wrong. Lastly, I would say that being successful in the tough business of filmmaking, because it is both tough and money-making business, let's not have any illusions about that, it is extremely hard, especially being a woman. And the filmmaking business, just as any other type of business, has rules. Lots of them impose creating film that either exclude female characters completely or putting them to supporting roles. In terms of subjects, the most popular ones also exclude female problems. Does this lead into the conclusions that in order to break through, a female director has to follow the mainstream? So that maybe after breaking through, it might be easier for her to change the stereotypes or be allowed to make other films? Should we make a compromise with our own beliefs and the things that we want to talk about in order to get the fame and the success and the access to more budget so that we can make the films that we want? And how can we deal with our consciousness after that? I am afraid I have no ambiguous answer to any of the questions of this paper. And that's the reality. I just want to say that being a female director, regardless whether it is in Korea, Bulgaria, Bangladesh, or India, or anywhere in the world, it's tough and responsible. A role that brings with itself the necessity to take decisions in terms of the characters we portray. And I can only hope that at some point in the future, there won't be any need to talk about how crucial those choices might be in terms of achieving gender equality. And there won't be any need for papers like this or a conference like this, because it will be just a movie made by a human being. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jana. We will definitely discuss some vital points, some vital questions later. Now, I would like to hand over the microphone to Ipshita. She is from India, Kolkata, and let's see what her reaction is. Ipshita.
Thank you. Thank you, Jana, for the lovely presentation. It was a delight hearing you, for sure. So when I came across this topic, I was very inquisitive because I've never worked with gender as in my research, but I was very inquisitive, and I thought that let me take a a quick research with one of my students, Raina Ghosh. So we discussed and we thought that let's just quickly find out about the female filmmakers of the Kolkata film industry. And number one, the mainstream, and so again, I was not looking at the non-mainstream indie films, but I was looking at the mainstream Bengali film industry. And to my surprise, there are only very few names which came up, and there's an interesting pattern in those names, and I would like to talk about it. So number one was Shiva Prasad Nondita Roy. They're very famous names in Bengali film industry, but whenever a name of Nondita Roy comes up, it's always along with Shiva Prasad. The same goes for so the same goes for the very famous Buddha Dev Dasgupta's daughter, Sohini Dasgupta. But nonetheless, whenever the name of Sohini Dasgupta comes up, it's the same. It's the father's name which is there. Then we started looking at if there's at all any individual female filmmakers whose names are not attached to any men counterparts. And the only name which we kind of could come up with was Pritha Mukherjee. Now, I happen to know Pritha personally as well, so we quickly set up an interview with her. And the first question I happened to ask her is that, Pritha, we are going to Dhaka conference, International Film Festival, and it's just one question, and we're working on this thing. So can you just give me names of 3 of your contemporaries, but just that they should happen to be female? And she could not come up with one name. So that kind of, becomes very surprising. I know that the issue is not just pertinent to Bengali film industry. I mean, the ratio of female filmmakers is very skewed in Bombay film industry, which is a very big industry, but there are only a handful of names like Zoya Akhtar, like Meghna Gulzar, like Gauri Shinde, which kind of comes up with. But, the number which in Bengali film industry, which was 1, that was kind of, very, very starking. Now, in my conversation with Pritha, I'll just quickly 1 or 2 points which came up and which was very interesting. Number 1, I was talking about that the one film which you made, she only made till date 1 film and another feature film is coming up. So I said, can you tell me that what was the gender ratio in that film? So how many men were there? So she said there was a total crew of 70 members, among which I was the sole female. Apart from, there was a woman in the costume department, and there was 2 in makeup and hair. So it was approximately 4:70. That is the ratio she gave me. So I said, I am not a filmmaker per se. So I was like, it'll be quite stark for me to work around 70 men who are belonging to the other gender. So how did you feel as a filmmaker? She said, Ipshita-di, it was kind of a little, at one point of time, yes, I was making my first film and I was very excited. But at the same point of time, the smaller things like when there was a pack up, no one came and asked me that, can we pack the film up? Instead, the cameraman who was just standing right beside me, so the assistant director came and asked the cameraman that shomoy hoye geche amra ki pack up kore debo, which means that can we pack up the film. Now this is the kind of issues which obviously women director, I mean in general, I'm just taking one case study, but I kind of I think all the filmmakers, women filmmakers face. So and when it comes to character, sorry if I'm taking too much time, I don't know. When it came to character, and I kind of revisited her film, it's very interesting. So her film is about this famous, in Bengal, in both sides of Bengal, there's a tiff between Shashuri, that is the mother-in-law, and the daughter-in-law. So the film is around the tiff between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, and there's a very interesting role of her. So the daughter-in-law decides to take the mother-in-law to a counselor, and the counselor is played by a very prominent Bengali film actress, Rituparna Sengupta. So it's a very short role, and she kind of navigates these two women and makes them understand that, you know, a woman should not be woman's enemy in the home sphere, right? So in terms of film, I find the film fascinating as well. But what was interesting, I asked Preetha that, Preetha, don't you want to make, your next film is again about women issues and so on and so forth, so don't you want to make something else? I was trying to think her degree film and so on and so forth. So she said, yes, absolutely, I want to make, I think she said, I don't know, action film or something of that sort. I said, then, okay, fine, I mean, that's very interesting, but can you let's start talking about the first degree film you made when you were in college with me, or let's talk about the first short documentary we saw of yours. And then quickly she started recounting all her work, and if I write a paper, we'll kind of recount all her work. All of them were around women issue. And the first short documentary she makes, I'm fascinated by that documentary, and I'll finish with just talking about the docu. It's called Where is the Woman's Home? So in the sense, especially in India and this part of the when we are not married, as in we, in the sense women are not married, they are basically under their parents' home. That's their mother's home or the parents' home. When we get married, it's the husband's home. So she, in her short documentary, asked the question that she just interviews random females, and she says, "Apnar bari konta?" And they say, "Amar shoshur bari eta, amar baper bari eta." She's like, "Apnar bari kothay?" So that's the short documentary, and that's my small.
Thank you. Wonderful reflections from Ipshita. Thank you. Now waiting for from Singapore. I'd like to hear your voice, Ashi. Would you please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ani. Thank you, Ipshita. And just one little bit of point, a positive note to start on, is that yes, a woman has won the Oscar for screenplay, which is Emerald Fennell for A Promising Woman, which is a rape revenge story. And this happened at the 93rd Oscars. And her speech was, I still get goosebumps when I think of her speech, and the fact that she's also directing the film, and she won it for the screenplay. So yes, a great start. I wear two hats. I wear a distributor hat, where as distributors of independent and mainstream films across the world, we have to watch at least sometimes 3 films a day. It's an interesting trend that, and many a times I don't, and it's not that I can't, I don't stop myself watching a film thinking, is it just a woman director, or is the editor a woman too? Is the DOP a woman too? And I'm noticing over the years very interesting trends in filmmaking from across the globe as well as South Asia and Southeast Asia, on how characters are depicted by male and female directors. And then when I reach the end credits, or even at the opening credits, I'm very careful to notice as a woman how many women are in the crew and important positions in the crew. And the trend is changing, I have to say, which is very, very encouraging. Of course, there are still pockets in mainstream Hindi cinema or regional cinema, but there too things are changing. The other thing that I always try to notice is, of course, who's the screenplay by? And one film that I'd like to talk about, 2 films specifically, with 2 ends of the spectrum. One is, which I was very, very honored and privileged to distribute, was A Fantastic Woman, the Chilean film which won the Academies for Best Foreign Language. And it was by Sebastian Lelio, but it's depicting not just a woman, but a transgender woman. And what came across very, very interestingly was it was a human story. The other end of this, and I could go on about Fantastic Woman, and I hope most of you have watched it. If you haven't, please do. And again, it's on Amazon, I think. The other film is Capernaum by Labaki. And when I watched Capernaum, the thing that constantly kept playing on my mind is, of course, it's a woman director. It's also a woman editor, Laure Gadet, who directed Police, another story on child and child abuse. And what I kept asking myself were two things. One is the kind of patience that she had with her character, because if you read the background and the behind the scenes of Capernaum, it's about the kind of patience, and she just let her camera be. And just filmed the child who was actually a refugee, and she just let it roll. And it's an open question, and it's nothing to do with gender, because I'll share the kind of experiences I'm having as a producer reading script from young filmmakers, and each and every day, every 2 days maybe, I read a new script, and I respect every script by reading it from end to end. And it's Labaki and Gadet, the way, and Gadet had enough and more material to maybe make 2 films, and the way she streamlined it, but keeping the pathos, the entity of the story intact. So I look at films, when I look at films as a distributor, I look at characters that are depicted not just by the director, but by the rest of the crew, and who are they? And there are very interesting men who have been depicting women very, very strongly, and I've never questioned that what if this film was made by a woman, would the character of the female or the male actors change? Some films is of course like The Great Indian Kitchen, which is about the film from southern India, which has created so much of wave, because it's a simple story about a woman in the kitchen and the mundanity she goes through. Please watch that film, all those who haven't yet. And it's directed by a very male director, a male DOP, a very young DOP from SRFTII, and who's done an excellent job of depicting her emotions and the male characters in the film too, and how she it all pens up inside her. Another film is Thappad by Anubhav Sinha, which is on domestic violence. And then you have the other side, you have Meghna's Talwar, which again I was very, very privileged to distribute. And you look at all these films and you look at it not from a female woman gaze. You'd look at it as a human story, talking about women and men. Of course, there are very, very distinct things that I noticed, like an OTT series like Clickbait, which is very crime. But when you watch it again and you look at some of the episodes which have a more human touch, you realize those are the episodes directed by a woman. So that comes out in some ways. But another thing that I'm also noticing is the actors in the industry are becoming very aware, and I talk about male and female actors, about the female roles in the film. And I have actors asking me when we approach them with script, if I have 2 very strong female-oriented films I'm producing out of India and Singapore, and the male actors and their names, they're not smaller actors, they've come out and said, wow, great, we are very happy that it's a strong female-oriented film. I'm not taking the front seat, and I'm happy not to. The other, and I'm going to end with that, there's loads that I could go on, I've always asked myself, what if Star Trek, such a very popular series, look at the 18 female characters there are, especially when you look at them, they're not people or characters that don't have flaws. The women do. Look at Captain Ratchet, the way she turns around her ship because she knows she's going to kill so many lives and the rest of the crew go with her. But what I'm noticing, Wonder Woman, of course, look at her. She's a superhero directed by a woman. Wonder Woman is directed by a woman. She's a superhero, but she has her flaws. She has her moments. At the same time, one thing that I'm noticing, and I'm so happy to say that the young men directors who come with me with screenplays, the intensity, sensibility, and some male directors I'm working with who are my age, I'm close to 50, and who have such sensibilities about their women characters. Oman Das from Malaysia, who I'm working with, intense introspection on what a woman thinks. And as a woman, I didn't find flaws in the script. There are various times I do. As a woman, I wear that hat. Maqsood from an upcoming director from Bangladesh. Look at Saad and look at what he created with Rehana Mariam Noor. And you have a male producer, Jeremy Chua, who's a great friend of mine from Singapore, who produced the film that is so woman-centric. And then I have the privilege of working with Tathagat Ghosh from Calcutta, and his intensity in his short films about the women. Proshun Chatterjee, Dostoji, look at his characters that he's created. So I think what's happening is the audience is also evolving. They know what they expect from the women characters, and that's where I wear my commercial distributor hat to say, this is what is happening, and I'm seeing a change in audience sensibilities. At the same time, the directors who are writing are becoming more aware of what are the human stories and what are the gender tropes. They are way more sensitive, they're way more intense, they're way more aware when writing their characters. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'll now invite questions from the audience. Any question? It's your issue, please. Okay then. I must thank Yana, Ipshita, and Sayoshi. And I was rejuvenated by the keynote paper and also brief discussions they made on various issues. I will definitely read out, if she allows me, her writing. I'm afraid I have no unambiguous answer to the question that I just want to say that being a female director, regardless whether it is in Korea, Bulgaria, or any other corner of the world, is tough and a responsible role. A role that brings with itself the necessity to make decisions in terms of characters one portrays. And I can only hope that at some point of future, there won't be any need to talk about how crucial those choices. The word I picked from here is the word choice. That's very important in terms of achieving gender equality. Choice is very important. Here, if I say it's a red flower, the flower is there, I made my choice. Then I choose the pen, choice is made. Now I juxtapose to convey a message, convey something. That's very theoretical, but that's how it works. Freedom is choice. Yes, freedom. So, to make a choice, one has to be very cautious. In his or her subconscious, that should work. And festivals like this, seminars like this, my field, my area of filmmaking, preparedness is very important. And probably from this seminar, I'll definitely get one who will start thinking, make her choice to make a film. It's difficult, I know. You have already told about the producer, the so-called producers, or those who finance the projects. That's a tragic part. It's same with me, same with you. There's no difference. I didn't get money to make my second film, my choice. No. After Guddi, I couldn't make. Guddi was my choice. I made the film with my money. I sold my wife's ornament, gold, and I could never recover it. But when I made another film, I remember Aina Bibi Pala, a famous story, a famous novel by Sayyid Shamsul Haq, a renowned writer who we lost him year before. The producer, I gave him the script, everything, the story, and the name, Sayyid Shamsul Haq. It's definitely a name. Unfortunately, end of the when I was shooting and he was watching, at that time we used to call, after each day shooting, we used to see the shots there. He proposed to me, please, one thing, Hawk, Mr. Hawk, or you sent your main character, the female character, to a brothel. She was rescued by a person there at the brothel. No. If you send your main character to brothel, it will be an insult, and no one will see this film. A Naika, a star, cannot go to a brothel. So they don't want a character, they want a star there. And stars do not read newspaper or in the morning, or do not go to toilet. Not my saying. That's Ritik Ghatak saying. He was my teacher in Pune Film Institute. So, I have one more point he has very pertinently raised. We should be making films. Why not? After 2001 Space Odyssey, the Star Child. What is the gender of Star Child? Do you know? Do you? I don't know. But it's there. It's there. So, probably there is a stagnation. There is after 2001, it is 2022. But what difference? What is the difference? The Star Child is he or she or it is there in our films? No.
Filmmaker, producer, festival programmer, and journalist, activist, many things here, this session. And I'm sure you're going to have one wonderful session today with this beautiful evening. And I would like to hand over this microphone to Samia Zaman to continue this session. Thank you.
It's okay. Good afternoon, everybody. We are coming almost to the end of this fabulous conference of Dhaka International Film Festival. I think it cannot be repeated enough that this conference series started 8 years ago. What I have noticed in most festivals, people have kind of discovered the women issue 3-4 years ago with the Me Too movement. So, congratulations to the festival director and to the festival itself to have been running this Women in Cinema conference series very successfully. I'm very proud and happy to be here chairing this particular session. Let me quickly introduce people which actually Shobhan Bhai Festival Director already have done, but welcome Geeta, the old friend of the festival, Ms. Naima Chowdhury. Good to have you here. And of course, now we are going to listen to Miral Melika Duran, producer, film festival programmer, and a strategist who's based in Paris, France. European cinema a close-up to women and diversity policies. We're looking forward to that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
And I'll take this opportunity, sorry, Meral. Let's have some silence here, and our catering helpers, please keep silent things. And if you have a phone call or something, try to take it outside. But yes, let's listen to Meral.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. I know that it was very intense for 2 days.
Recording in progress.
I think we are in progress. I hope so, inshallah. No. Okay. And that is very difficult when we are arriving at the end of 2 days of a very intense conference. And I hope that we're going to keep to have your attention for a few more hours. Well, I would like today to present a special close-up to women and diversity policies in Europe and European institutions. I know it seems very far for you, and I know that it's geographically perhaps far, but it's not that far. And I wanted to make a presentation which kind of like analytic, and I will really present you our different organs, because I think it's going to be a basis for you to understand more what is Europe and what we have inside Europe, division of the organization, and what kind of possibility Europe offers and can also offers for you. Well, the past years has been marked by the COVID-19 pandemic for all of us worldwide, which have proven to be a major challenges for gender equality again. The pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities between women and men in almost all areas of life, both in Europe and worldwide. According to European policy, achieving gender equality is central to the fulfillment of the European missions. But I don't want to just stop it and say that it's the mission of Europe. It's also the mission of all the countries in the world. But for Europe, it's written on the declaration: safeguarding human rights, upholding democracy, and preserving the rule of law. Gender equality means equal right, visibility, empowerment, responsibility, and participation for both women and men in all spheres of public and private life. It also means equal access and equal distribution of resources between women and men. Equal distribution. I just would like to underline that again. Respect for fundamental freedom and human rights, including gender equality, is prerequisite for the creation and distribution of diverse cultural expression. The European film industry is arguably the most high profile of all the creative industry, which considerable cultural, societal, and well as economic weight. Europe knows that film is a powerful medium that in many ways reflects and shapes society and culture. Gender imbalance and stereotyping in cinema have received critical attention over several decades. But more recently, discussion on gender equality and diversity in the film industry have gained increasing momentum amid the ongoing reflections sparkled by the global anti-sexual harassment campaign that we probably all know, Me Too movement, and Hollywood's Time's Up campaign. Women are severely underrepresented in the workforce and have undeniably less access to resources and face substantial gender pay gap. While women account for 51% of the European population. I'm going to talk about the European time for this one. 51% of the European population is women, but we only count of 20% of the film produced in Europe between 2015 and 2018 was directed by female director, unfortunately. And we did a little bit of improvement, but it's less than 1%. That's why it's just like peanuts, nothing. In Europe, only 1 in 5 female films is directed by women, and only 16% of the funding goes to the films directed by women. In addition, we seem to witness a worldwide shift from gender equality policies to a broader diversity and inclusion approach. Therefore, it is not strange that most of the identified D&I, like diversity and inclusion, analyses and monitoring tools were implemented in EU. Countries which have made a priority of closing the gender gap in the audiovisual industry, or in EU member countries with a growingly diverse society, are both working on gender diversity and inclusiveness. What is diversity and inclusion, by the way? According to the Cambridge Dictionary, there is 2 definitions of diversity. The fact of many different types of things or people being included in something, a range of different things or people, and we have the fact that there are many different ideas or opinion about something. This is Cambridge Dictionary. The D&I gained momentum both overall and very especially within audiovisual industries in Europe. We can explain that with some very precise movement. We have, in the last few years, we have been seeing movements such as 50-50, Oscars So White, and White Washed Out. This is the most famous hashtag we used in Europe. We can distinguish between on-screen and off-screen diversity and inclusion, with each category having a quantitative and qualitative dimension to it. Despite the fact that some of the trends related to D&I are global, in most European countries, a correlation can be observed between the growing diversity of a society and the number of immigrants, which has grown steadily in most EU countries within the last few years. Although immigration is not the only element that determine a country's diversity, it is the only one which can have a quick, sharp impact on the composition of a country. Other indications such as gender, sexual orientation, and a handicap are unlikely to describe comparable quantitative changes. Nevertheless, diversity can be measured only in quantitative terms. But for now, that's the case for most of the policy which is put in place in Europe and European countries. The European policies on gender and diversity and film industry in large, we'll talk about that a little bit. We have the European Commission. The European Commission, if you heard about it, I don't know how many of you know, was established by the Treaty of Rome in 1957. And it's made by a member city, 25 member countries. And all the state of these countries are sitting around the table to take decision for their countries. The European Commission is one of the main institutions of the European Union, along with the Council of the European Union and the European Parliament, and of course the European Council. Gender equality is a goal in itself and a cross-sectorial issue for Europe, which must be the focus on a practical decision-making process. Women and men should benefit from the promotion and protection of the same rights, freedom and opportunities, and of course, and this includes participation in economic and cultural activities, such as the film and audiovisual industries. In all its activities, the Union shall aim to eliminate inequalities and to promote equality between men and women. This is the word of the President of the EU Commission now, which is a woman from Germany. Did we arrive and did we achieve that? Not yet. The promotion of equality between women and men is a task for the European Union in all its activity, and it is required by the treaties. It's official, it's legal, it's in the treaties. I really underline that because sometimes we're talking about women's rights and human rights and everything, but as soon as it's not written and signed and accepted by the countries, if there's no law, there's no legislation, no basis, it's only word. And sometimes word can be said and just forgotten very easily, even sometimes when it's in treaties, unfortunately. Gender equality is a core value of the EU, a fundamental right and a key principle of the European Pillar of Social Rights. It is an essential condition for an innovative, competitive, and a thriving European economy. In business, politics, and society as a whole, Europe can only reach full potential if she uses all of the talent and diversity within, including immigrants, legal and non-legal. For me, gender equality brings more jobs and higher productivity. And this is not only for Europe, this is worldwide. If we have a gender equality and gender balance, we will be more equally working together and growing together. You can grow your country, you can grow your economy, and you can change the mentality with an equal and higher productivity. The European Union is a global leader in gender equality. 14 of the top 20 countries worldwide on gender equality are from EU, are from Europe. Due to his robust equal treatment legislation and jurisprudence, effort to mainstream the gender perspective into different policy and laws to address particular inequalities, the EU has made significant progress in gender equality in the last decade. That's why I again underline the importance of the treaties and also the legislation. We should have a legislation. It is also the case for, I think, Bangladesh and the subcontinent of India. Equality in the last decade, however, no member state has achieved full gender equality and progress in the EU as well. None of us. We are not fully gender equal, but we are working on it. The Me Too movement has demonstrated the extent of sexism and abuse that women and girls continue to face. At the same time, it has empowered women across the globe to now come forward with their experiences and bring cases to court and to ask for equal representation on screen. And I would like to add that with this movement, you like it or you dislike it. I don't want to talk about if it was right or wrong or what it is. But I seen one thing which was true and real. It was the unity around this Me Too event. At one point, everyone was touched by this Me Too, in one way or another.